mama, I got bad news, bad news. I've been rolling with some bad dudes, bad dudes. I've been trying to get a bag too, a bag too.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Ashes to Awesome podcast, Rising in Recovery. Our podcast provides light, hope, and understanding about addiction and mental health to those living within that life and the people who love them. Today's episode is brought to you by Revolution Recovery, helping men recover and become their best selves through support and treatment. They've been there and they understand.
Okay. Hey, listeners. So I am sitting in virtual studio with Nate Mccready from Mission, BC. He is he's got an interesting story for us. He's also a member of the. I'm going to let you tell you what the title is of your job in the organization that you're at there too, there, Nate. But how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm had a pretty good day today. I was at work and had a good weekend.
So
good stuff. It was great. Yeah,
good stuff. I know. Ryan kind of portrays you as a no nonsense, kind of tough as nails boss, and I got to tell you, I think he might have been exaggerating. I'm not going to tell you all the other things he said about you. So, full disclosure to the listeners, Ryan Bathgate, our Kaleidoscope Wednesday co-host, Nate is his boss, I guess. Ryan reports to him at his job out in the outreach that they're doing out there. So, I guess before we get into your story, now that I've kind of let that cat out of the bag, what is it you guys are doing out there, Nate?
So I work for Mission Community Services. I'm the executive director.
Okay.
So we actually run about 28 programs altogether.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we have programs that we run for family services along with the Ministry of Children and Family Development.
Yep.
We have shelters, housing, a food center, outreach team, homeless prevention, and some I'm missing. We're pretty vast. You know, our newest one is, which we're going to talk about maybe at the end of this, is our new medical mobile unit that's coming into town.
Yeah.
So we're constantly looking to grow and do as much as we can to assist the community. We try to remember that we're community services. We're not just housing. We're not just family services. We're supposed to be helping at all levels of the community.
Wow, I love that. I do. It must be rewarding as a way to make a living, I guess, compared to some of the other things that we end up getting wrapped up in our lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. I mean, you always hear people say that this is not a business that you get into for the money because, we're, honestly, we pay as little as we can because that's how much the government wants to give us, is as little as they can.
Of course, I guess, right? So, sorry. I have to ask, Nate, there must be some really frustrating days with something like that, in that position, seeing the people that you couldn't help or the people that, that wouldn't get help or whatever. And that's not really where I saw this conversation going, but it just kind of, came out. Is that true, or is there more rewarding, or is there?
Absolutely. I think there are some really frustrating days, and there can also be heartbreaking days. So so for myself, when I was doing youth outreach, which goes back a long ways, but when I was doing youth outreach, what would happen for me is I would have these days where I could go in and do a really solid day's work. One day in particular I'll talk about. So I went in and I helped a couple of youth find housing. I helped a youth get into detox. And then I found a young, married couple, and they needed some food, and I helped them get food and groceries. Mm-hmm. I'm headed home. I had stopped and talked to a couple of youth, and we just had good conversation. They felt connected. I felt connected. It was a very good day. Mm-hmm. And as I was driving out of the downtown east side, which is where I was doing my outreach, I was just kind of looking around, and I thought, okay, I had this, what I'm calling a good day at work, and it's not even a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
And that would throw me into a little depression, which would last for 2 or 3 days sometimes. However, I developed a little method around it.
Do tell.
I would go and I would have this feeling, and I would, be on my way home. I'd be feeling all sad and depressed, and I would stop and I'd buy a liter of ice cream. And I'd get home and I'd turn on the TV and I'd sit there with my ice cream, right? I could be sad until the ice cream's all gone, right? When the ice cream's all gone, I got to cheer up and get back to work. And I do think that for all youth workers that work in that level of trauma with youth, there's a price to pay. You're going to pay it, whether you're having nightmares or whatever happens. Most of the people that I know that work with youth in their traumatic experiences, there's a price that they pay for doing that work.
I I can imagine and kind of relate. We on the show here, I don't know how much Ryan's told you about the show specifically. We do up until just now. Actually, the format's changing. I've done a 6-day-a-week program for the last few months. 6 episodes a week, with each day being dedicated to a different lens of addiction and mental health and trauma and all of those things. And Mondays were Memorial Mondays, and Fridays were Family Fridays, where we were talking to the people that are affected, conscripted soldiers, if you will, in the fight against addiction, right? And no small part of the reason that I've decided to, I would never get rid of those 2 days. They're both too important, but I can't do them every week anymore, right? And so I can't imagine what, just the pure, you're immersing yourself in sadness all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
and
I can't imagine for years at a time how that must affect somebody,
Yeah, and sometimes like doing the youth work and working with the families can be difficult. So I was working with 2 young ladies on the street.
Yeah.
Who were about 14 years of age. The mom had contacted me that she wanted to get back in touch with her daughter, but I knew from speaking with the daughter, she wanted nothing to do with mom at the time.
Yeah.
So we put together a little plan where the daughter was panhandling on Granville. This was years ago, but she was panhandling on Granville. And so the plan we put together was for mom to walk by her every day. Don't stop and ask questions. Don't try and get her to come home. Just walk by and say hi and keep right on going.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she did that for about a week and a half, and her daughter called her and said, "Hey, how come you never stop and talk?" And now all of a sudden they were having a conversation.
That's
but
genius.
The daughter wanted nothing to do with her prior to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she, her mom just walking by and saying, "Hi," and then she keeps going. She knows she's trying to go, "Well, what's going on here?" She's not arguing with me. She's not fighting with me.
Some positive manipulation happening there, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then once that connection forms, you got something to work with,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I always found with youth, like there's ways to get things done, but you also have to remember they've got their own agency.
Yeah.
And especially when they've run away and they're on the street, they really feel like I'm an adult and you can't tell me what to do kind of thing. And so it can be some walls to break through with them.
I can imagine. And I'm sure it's most of the time it doesn't work out that way, though I can't be sure of anything. But do you sometimes, is there people that you've managed to reconnect with 10 years, 20 years, if you've been in this for some time now, for instance, a 14-year-old who's now 25 and doing well, or do you ever get to see the end results and,
I have some youth who've called me just to check in and say, "Hey, I'm doing great now."
Oh, that must be so rewarding, right?
Yeah, it really is. And I have one young woman who, like, she has kids now and stuff. She still connects with, she just connected with me on Facebook the other day. Said, "Hey, we should get together for coffee," because we do that once in a while. We'll go for coffee. I still get to connect with a lot of the kids I worked with.
That validation must be almost necessary, I think, if only occasionally, right? Just to know, right? I would think so. So.
Yeah, when I was doing the street outreach with youth, had a couple of interesting things, but one of the interesting things with the kids themselves is as I got known with the youth, I didn't really have to go out and look for the new kids on the street because the youth would bring them to me.
Okay.
And they would say, "Hey, come on, Nate, this is Joe. He's new. He needs your card." Right? And they would say things to Joe like, "Joe, you know what? You need this guy's card. He's going to save your life one day."
Oh, wow.
You've got to get to know this guy. Right? So I was able to establish like strong enough connections with the youth on the street that they made sure the new youth on the street knew who I was and got my card, knew where to find me. That was really rewarding. But I have a cool story if we have time.
We got time. Absolutely, we got time. Yeah.
So I was working with this young lady and a young man.
Yeah.
I think that she was 17, he was 18. And they had run away or left home. I guess they were old enough they didn't really have to run away, but they had left home. They were living on the streets in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I got a call from the girl's mom. And she said, "Hi, my name's so-and-so. I live in Manitoba. My daughter told me that if I ever needed to find her, I should call you."
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, "Okay, cool. And what's up?" She goes, "Well, she's trying to get away from her boyfriend, but he's got her trapped. So I've got a bus ticket for her if you can get her to the bus station." So I said, okay. So I knew exactly who, she told me who they were. So I had a student working with me at the time, a practicum student.
Yeah.
So I called her up at 9 o'clock and said, hey, we're not starting at noon today. We're starting at 9:30. I'll be there to pick you up. So we jumped in the car. We drove over to the areas where we knew those two to hang out. Actually, it might have been 8 o'clock, not 9 o'clock. And the last place we went was the art gallery. Because kids used to hang out on the steps there, right? So the last place we went was the art gallery, and we found them sleeping on the lawn.
Okay.
So I went over, and the young lady woke up. The young man didn't. The young lady woke up, so she took me off to the side and said, here's what's going on. I said, okay, your mom's got a bus ticket home. She goes, but, I got to get out of here. So she goes, here's what we do. When he gets up, he's going to go to the men's washroom. I'm going to go to the women's washroom. But he'll be standing outside waiting for me when I come out. So when he goes in the washroom, I'll meet you over here on the corner.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. And that's how we picked her up.
Okay.
We got her to the bus station. It didn't leave until 2 o'clock. So took her to the youth detox. She had a shower. And then we had a couple hours to kill, and I didn't really want to leave her alone until we got her on the bus.
Yeah.
So I said, well, what would you like to do? And she said, one thing I've always wanted to do in Vancouver, but I haven't been able to do, is go to the horse racing. So off we went.
Interesting. Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it was a very cool story. Like, it was a very cool moment for me to have a mom call me and say, you know what? My daughter said if, she was in trouble or if I ever need to get a hold of her, to call you. Like, to know that a youth had taken my number, given it to their parent, and said, if you need me, this is where you call.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. It's heartwarming.
Yeah.
But so what I'd like to do, Nate, is find out how you get to a point where you are an outreach worker and the story behind that, because I imagine there's some lived experience to go with that. Yep.
There is. There's definitely my road to outreach. Came
So
purely through lived experience.
Could you go back and there's the reason that we're having the conversation in the first place is you've got a history with substance, be it alcohol or drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
Can you kind of take us way back to the first time that you tried something and go from there? Yeah.
So as a kid, I would say, like, my first drink of alcohol or beer probably came at 3 or 4 years old.
Wow.
It was a pretty common thing for, you go get dad a beer and he'd give you a drink when you brought it to him.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, right? But my first real, what I call drinking experience, happened when I was 7. And I call it my first drinking experience because it was when I stole a beer, took it upstairs into the bathroom, and I sat and drank alone.
Okay.
And that would become my lifetime pattern, sit and drink alone.
Yeah.
So I consider that to be really my first time.
Do you
drinking.
remember how it made you feel?
No, not in those early instances. I do have as I grow older, I can kind of go, and here's where my addiction started.
Of course, with the benefit of hindsight and that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, 7's pretty young to really even remember, let alone the details of how you felt in that, right? So
so I had just kind of started drinking, and our family moved from Vancouver to Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
And there was some sexual abuse that was happening in Vancouver. That when we left, the sexual abuse stopped. So the sexual abuse wasn't something that was inside my family. So it stopped when we moved. But what didn't stop was a lot of physical and emotional abuse.
Yeah.
My dad was pretty good at laying hands on me, and that's the way he thought kids should be raised, or it's the way he thought boys should be raised. He was a little different with my sisters. But we had a violent household. It's not just my dad. Like, our whole house was violent.
Yeah.
And we moved around a lot. And we were one of those families where if you fought one of us, you fought all of us. And I think that was because we moved so much that we were pretty tight.
Can't help but to close ranks, and right.
Yeah. And so that was kind of how we lived. Like, I'd get into fights as a kid because someone said something to my sister.
Yeah, right.
Like, that's not gonna
Funny, I
fly,
got a few
buddy.
of those fights on the other side of that, saying something to somebody's sister back in the day, right?
So we lived in Saskatchewan for about a year. We had we lived the first 2 months in a condemned house.
Oh, wow.
So my dad had gotten a job out in somewhere in Saskatchewan there, and so we lived in this little town called Pennant, 75 people.
I know where Pence is. Yep. Yeah.
And we could only be in the basement because the top had been condemned. They were afraid we'd come through the floors.
Oh, wow.
So we had no furniture, Everybody had a mattress and a sleeping bag, a pillow, and we had one of those old record players where you lift the lid up for the speaker.
Yeah, yeah.
That was our entertainment. No fridge, no stove. My mom had a
Wow.
hot plate. And then every morning, my mom and myself and my little sister, we'd walk to the general store.
Yeah.
We'd buy whatever, sandwich meat, bread, milk, and a bag of ice. Then we'd come home, we'd pour the ice into the sink, and that was our fridge for the day. Put whatever we needed on there. And, you know, as a kid, I look back and I go, yeah, one of the best summers I ever had was living in Saskatchewan. It was fun. We had a fun time. We moved to Cabri, about 750 people. We stayed there about a year.
I know where Cabri is too, actually. That's funny.
Yeah. And then,
I worked for the big trucking company out there for years. So
okay.
Where all the little towns are. Right?
Yeah.
So,
the big thing actually in Pennant, my big thing to do in Pennant was to go play at the John Deere the John Deere, whatever, where they sell John Deere tractors.
Dealership. Yeah.
The John Deere dealership. They had a little one out front. They used to let all the kids sit on there and play, right? So we went from there. We went to Calgary. And then in Calgary, we moved around a lot, even within the city of Calgary.
Okay.
But we had a significant event for me happened while we were in Calgary.
Yeah.
I was downstairs sleeping, and I woke up to my mom screaming. And I didn't know, what was going on. And I just kind of froze. Like I was 10 and, like I said, I just froze. I didn't know what to do. I could hear my dad come charging down the stairs, and I heard him, he must have grabbed somebody. He's at the front door. You son of a bitch, what are you doing in my house? I'm going to check on my wife and I'll kill you if she's hurt. Paraphrasing, but that's what he said.
Yeah.
So he runs back upstairs to see my mom. Of course, the guy splits. Turns out, they called the police. The guy came back. So where we lived was like low-cost kind of housing.
Yeah.
And so every second place was identical. So he thought he was in his place. He actually walked into the house with no lights on, went up the stairs, turned left, down the hall, opened the door on the right, expecting to see his wife.
Wow.
And he saw my mom. So my dad had gone out, I think, to get a prescription or something for my mom. And so then I came upstairs after everything had kind of settled. And I remember sitting with my mom and talking, but I don't really remember what we spoke about.
How old would you have been for this, give or take?
About 10.
Okay.
About 10. And so the next day, so now I was terrified. Like I was frozen. Like I couldn't move. And the next day I was out with my dad and I told him what happened. I said, I heard what happened and I froze, like I couldn't move. And my dad's response to that was, only a coward would hear their mother scream and not get out of bed. So I learned pretty early on that I was a coward, and that was kind of how I started to live.
Wow.
That was a tough one. It took me a very, very long time to get past that.
I guess so. Yeah.
So at that age, my drinking was, so I used to say I drank like a normal 10-year-old. I've learned that normal 10-year-olds don't drink.
Yeah, of course, right? Yeah.
So my normal drinking as 10-year-old was, sneak a beer out of the fridge here and there. But in particular, if I got up and my parents had friends over and there was, rye and Coke sitting on the table that somebody hadn't finished, those kinds of things, I would pretend, I'll clean up. And I would drink whatever was left over.
Yeah.
Right. And then around 13, I started figuring out how to get booze. Once in a while, I started drinking pot. My real trip into addiction came around, for my 13th birthday. My mom came to me and said, we don't celebrate birthdays anymore. And she gave me a $50 bill.
Okay.
My dad came to me and said, you know what, you're not doing very good in school. So here's a pair of work boots for your birthday. And you need to start paying for your own clothes and starting to pay your way here. So I went to work in construction on the weekends and the summer times with my dad when I was 13. And, they go into the bar after work and have a few beer, and I'd sit out in the truck and wait. So when I turned 14, they decided, let's bring him in. So I'm waiting in the car, and then my dad and this fellow named Jack Dubeck come out to the car. Probably shouldn't use last names. This guy.
Yeah.
My dad, Jack, come out to the car, and my dad says, hey, why don't you come in and have a beer? And I right away, I was like, well, they'll ask me for ID. right? And Jack goes, well, you know what? You can come in or I'll drag you in. And if I drag you in, guaranteed they're going to ask you, right? So I go in the bar, have a couple of beers, come back out, and we head to Calgary. We were in Airdrie, and then we headed for Calgary. And so the next day we went to work in Calgary, and everybody saw that we were all from Edmonton. We went to work in Calgary, and afterwards it was like, hey, we're going to the airliner. Have a few beers. I was like, oh, I'll go. Because now I'm confident, right? I got in the night before.
I know where the airliner is. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, sat down between two of the guys who just kept passing me the beers.
Yeah.
I was in there for about 2 hours, and then I when I stood up to walk out, as soon as I got outside, I was struggling to walk, like I was staggering.
Yeah.
Got up to my room. I threw up like 5 times. My dad came up and made sure I was okay, and then he went back down to the bar. Previous to all of this at work, I was sort of doing the light duty jobs, like painting the wells and crimping and technical terms, but doing those things. And the next day he said, hey, so I get up the next day and he's like, hey, you want to drink with the men? Then you can go work with the men. And so now I'm doing the much heavier work, like dragging sheets of metal around and walking around open edges and things like that. And I just knew I had found the answer to all my problems.
Now, for a quick public service announcement. One of the best ways to reduce stigma is with education. If you still have questions that we haven't answered on today's show, you can learn more about Together We Can's education group at twcrecoverylife.org.
Hi everybody, this is Carl with today's public service announcement about naloxone, or, as it's more commonly known, Narcan, a medication that can help save the life of somebody experiencing an opioid overdose. Did you know that in 2021 opioids were responsible for over 7,000 deaths in Canada and 106,000 deaths in the United States? These numbers are staggering, but there is hope. Narcan is a medication that can reverse the effects of an opioid overdose and help save a life. Narcan is available for free at participating pharmacies and harm reduction centers across Canada and is also available without a prescription at most pharmacies in the United States. Now, I know most of you won't be around people using opioids, but you never know when it will be around you, and you could save the life of someone who is loved and who loves.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't a coward when I was drunk. I liked the way it made me feel. The next day, my dad validated me. He put me in with the men. I was treated like a man. And, it just seemed like drinking was the answer to all my problems.
So at that time, were you self-aware enough to know that that's what was happening with you? Or does that come down the road as well?
No, even at that time, I thought, that's the answer. Get drunk. Okay. That's the answer. Get drunk. I didn't think of it in terms of alcoholism, though.
No, of course
just
not.
like, drinking is the answer to all my problems, right?
No kidding. Yeah.
So like there I was at 14 and that was following really other addictions, but it wasn't until I was 14 that I said, oh, I do have an addiction here, right? Yeah. Like again, in hindsight. But at 13, I was sniffing glue pretty much every day.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right through when we moved when I was in grade 8. And so we moved about halfway through the year. So actually from the time we moved until school ended, I did glue just about every day. Like I had it down pat to where people were, it was kind of a smaller town. We were in St. Albert.
Yep.
Much smaller than it is today. So the people in the stores who did sell model glue were asking me, hey, didn't you just buy some of this? Right?
Yeah.
So I came up with this little plan where I'd buy a model and I'd carry that same model into the stores every week to go buy all my model glue. But you could see I got a model in my hand.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
And then from there, I also went to painkillers.
Oh, okay.
So the 292s, I don't know if you recall those.
Don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, those are popular in the 70s. They actually took them off the market.
Oh, really? Were they an opiate or something?
Yes, they had a bit of an opiate base and they were really strong.
Okay.
So I would take those like a handful a day, 4 or 5 at a time. And that's when I was like 14. And I also started at 14, I started my first adventure into self-harm. So at 14, I had burned myself with cigarettes. I did that twice.
Wow.
And, it started over the years. My self-harm lasted from the time I was 14 till I was about 21.
Okay.
But it included like cigarette burns, cuts with razors, things like that. Like I have scars on my face from it, scars on my arms. I still have some scars left over from doing that. Some you can't see, and some you can only see when I get a tan.
Yeah, right. Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had a lot going on at 14.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our home, boy, for myself and my sisters, we all got out of there as soon as we could.
Yeah.
So, there was, like I said, there was a lot of violence in our home. And for me, it kind of ended when I came home and I walked in the door and my dad he hit me for no reason. Like he just happened to be at the bottom of the stairs as I came in the door, and he hit me, and I went back through the door.
Wow.
And as I started to come back in, I heard my mom say to him, like, "You didn't have to hit him." And he said, "Yes, I did." And to this day, I don't know why.
Wow.
Yeah, and I can't ask him anymore. He's gone. So to this day, I don't know why I got hit that day. But it was enough for me to go, yeah, I think I'm done here. And
fair enough, eh? Fair enough.
Yeah, no, I ended up staying pretty connected with my dad through the years, and even working with him again, and doing a lot of other things. It's one of those, stay close to your abuser situations.
Yeah.
And I had a great relationship with my dad before he passed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we had plenty of years where we did very well, but when I was growing up, it wasn't those years.
Yeah.
Those years were a struggle.
In an instance like that, and please don't feel obligated to say anything more than you're comfortable with, but is that something that you go back and address with him in the years to come, or is that something that you both just kind of, let's not talk about that and let's move forward, right? Like I always wonder when a situation goes from one to the other that way, right?
So we didn't really talk about it.
No.
I did lots of counseling around it. I actually went and I did some like inner child work, and I did a lot of therapeutic things in order to get where I am today. And my dad and I never really talked. But I do, there was one time when my son was out with my dad, and they were just talking about raising kids. And my son goes, Dad, he said, all of a sudden he looked at me and he went, "Al, whatever you do, don't hit your kids." And he said, like, he was almost crying. He said, I thought for sure he was going to cry. And when he was telling my son, "Hey, don't hit your kids."
Well, so something got through.
Yeah. So I think there was some remorse there when he looked back at his life. I think he looked back going, could have done that better.
Yeah.
So,
but that's for that generation, that's a lot of progress right there, right?
Yeah.
Right?
And for myself, when I first got into treatment and therapy and that, I just reached a place of, for both of my parents, I don't think either one of them abused me for the sake of abusing me, or were harsh for the sake of being harsh. I think they actually thought they were doing the right thing, that they were doing the best they could with what they had been given. I would learn later on that my dad was savagely beat by his dad. So it's kind of like, hey, I didn't beat on you the way I got beat on.
Yeah, right.
So maybe I'm doing this the right way, right? Yeah. And in all fairness, I can't say I've never hit my kids, but I certainly didn't hit them as much as I got hit. And I think that now, my kids are not hitting their kids.
Yeah,
I think that's where we are today.
As society evolves, and the generations with it, right? So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and by 16, I was smoking and drinking smoking pot and drinking on a daily basis. I had left home. I was living in Arizona.
Yep.
At 16, I got down there when I was 16, and I was working at the racetrack, like horses.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, so I was down there, and I worked for a guy he raced in Edmonton and Calgary in the spring, summer, and fall, and then we went to Arizona in the winter.
Okay.
So I was 16 years old, different country, long way from home, a lot of loneliness. I was 16. I wasn't really around other high school kids. I was around other adults who were working and making their way in the world.
And drinking, no doubt.
And
right?
drinking, and smoking weed and doing those things. So I was alone a lot. So it was a lonely teenage experience.
But
I did enjoy the work. I did like working with the horses, and the weed was cheap at that time down there. So that counted too.
Yeah, I guess so, eh? I guess so, yeah.
So I stayed with the track for a couple of years, and then back to Edmonton, back into construction, got a girlfriend, drank a lot, smoked a lot of weed, started doing acid. I did acid for quite a while, did some pills, a lot of mushrooms and stuff. I got about a 5-year period with acid and psychedelics. But I also got this, my girlfriend at the time, and she's now my ex-wife, got her pregnant. And so we got married, and not because, you know, we were in love or we had all these big plans. We got married because she got pregnant, and we just thought it was the right thing to do. You know. So she really didn't like my drinking and drugging. So I just went underground with it. Right? Like, I just lied to her about it. I lied to her about it for 20 years. I ended up getting onto coke. I did coke for, good 7 or 8 years before it really, you know, before it brought me down. But I was leading such a double life. So I would, at times during the day, be hanging out on the downtown east side, maybe getting into fights, getting drunk, doing drugs, you know, doing coke behind the dumpster. And then on the weekends, I was coaching hockey. You know, my sons both played hockey. You know, in Abbotsford at the time, I was, you know, kind of a popular coach. Like, people would be, hey, you know, I want my kids on his team. I was good with kids, but just the way I was and who I was at the time, I wasn't very good with adults. I was rude, short. I just wasn't good with adults. And we would even have people call the house and talk to my ex and say, hey, I would like to see, you know, Johnny get on his team this year. Can you talk to Nate? And she'd say, well, do you want to talk to him? And they'd say, no, not at all. But if you could get my kid on his team, that'd be fabulous. And, you know, I think that people like their kids on my team because I used hockey to teach life lessons and things like that. But I was definitely living 2 lifestyles. You know, one of the things I say
capable of is quite amazing, right? In addiction, it's
I say to people, like, if you saw our family from the outside, we looked pretty normal. Like, we looked pretty good. You know, dad's coaching hockey, mom and dad are both working, kids are going to school. But for anybody on the inside of the family, you know, rent wasn't getting paid, car payments weren't getting paid, groceries weren't being bought. You know, kids didn't have bicycles, went without new shoes. Like, there was a lot of very poor parenting on my part. And I can't blame my ex for that stuff. No. She was just a victim of it, just the same way the kids were.
Right.
So, you know, she was doing her best with what she had to work with wasn't much.
Right. Yeah. So.
You know, so we lived that way for 20 years. You know, every once in a while something would come up. And I don't know that I ever actually looked at my ex and said, yep, I'm using a lot of drugs or I'm drinking a lot. You know, she would say,
she had to know it's something, you know, the money.
Yeah, you know, she would say, have you been out drinking? I'd say no. And she would say to this day that she didn't know.
Really, eh?
Yeah, as far as I know, she would still say to this day that she really didn't know. But in hindsight, and also whenever I'm telling this story to people, they go, well, she must have known.
Yeah, right.
But to her, she would say no. You know, she would take my word for it. Or there was also that, it could be, and I don't know that this is what it is, but it could be there's that enabler piece, right? You know, her dad was an alcoholic, so it was maybe something acceptable there for her.
Ignorance is bliss. It really is, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's, you know, right? So who knows, right? But you can never really speak for another person anyway. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, I went through about 10 grand in about 6 weeks and just thought, okay, well, like, that's it, man. I'm just a drug addict, and I should just go to the downtown east side and not come back. So I basically ran away from home. I was 40 years old.
Jeez,
and I basically ran away from home, right? Left a note saying, yep, this is what's been going on. And I'm headed to the downtown east side.
Yeah.
Was down there for a bit. I had a room at the Patricia. And then just as I was facing homelessness,
Yeah.
I thought, maybe I should go get some help before I actually sleep on the street, right? So I went walking around, found my way into UGM down there. They brought me in. They were really good. I actually thought, they're going to tell me I don't need treatment. Like when I was sitting there in the intake, I thought they're going to tell me you don't need this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually they came out and said, listen, you don't have a way to pay, but we think it would be like really dangerous to put you back on the street right now. So we're just going to bring you in. We'll figure that out later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm in, sitting there, I decide to go for a drink of water, and I head downstairs to UGM, and I took the wrong turn, and I come out the wrong door, and I'm nose to nose with my pastor at the time.
Oh.
Yeah, I had started going to church as a way to sober up about 3 years earlier.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And while I was able to find myself spiritually and develop my relationship with God and all that, I wasn't able to stop drinking or drugging.
Yeah.
So I end up at UGM. Now I'm standing in front of my pastor, and he's like, "Hey, Nate, we've come down here to help." And then he had a bunch of, my ex was there, a couple people from the church, a friend of mine was there, and they were like, "Let's just get you out of here. Let's get you someplace different." So I ended up going to Miracle Valley.
Okay.
Which was not too far from Mission here. It was just out on Stave Lake. But it was sort of out in the bush, like it wasn't part of the city. You're just out in the middle of the mountains.
Yeah, which can be helpful.
Yeah, it was a beautiful place to recover, right? Like I really liked it. But I didn't stay the whole time. I stayed for, it was a 12-week program, including your first couple of weeks, then a 10-week primary program. So I stayed about 7 or 8 weeks. And I went to my counselor, and like one of their things was you had to be on step 5 in order to be complete. And I was on step 8. And so I went to my counselor and just said, like, I think I've done what I can do here. And she agreed. She said, I agree. I don't think there's much more you're going to do here except get some clean time. So you might as well go back in the community. I had a job to go to. I had a church, I had some support. So she just said the things you're going to need to do is connect into the 12-step program. So you might as well go out and do that.
Yeah.
So I did leave. I stayed sober. I went to a few meetings, not too many. Stayed sober for about 1.5 years. And I thought, there's things going on in the house that are not adding up and not looking right. Yeah. So I looked into those things, thought, yeah, I'm right. This shouldn't be happening. And so my ex and I split up maybe like a few months later. We were done.
Yeah.
I stayed sober for maybe another 3 months after that, because I relapsed at that point. Then I sobered up again, and then I found myself back in treatment in 2001.
Okay. Yep.
So actually, August 10th, 2001. That was my last day.
Oh. Okay.
So I got into treatment, and I had like a lot of anger coming up, and it was rude. I was hard to be around. And I had this friend named Corey, who I knew from the first time I was in treatment in 99. Yeah. He was back there as well in 2001.
Oh, yeah.
He was a very street entrenched guy. He was a drug dealer. I wasn't those things, right? I was a functioning alcoholic, as they say.
Yep. Yep.
But he could handle my anger. I was really rude. Like first one day he came over and I was having breakfast, and he was like, "Hey," I was sitting by myself because I always did. And he said, "Hey, can I join you?" And I just looked at him and said, "What are you doing at my fucking table?" And he just looked at me and he laughed and he went, "That a boy, let it out." And he sat down. Yeah. And I was like, I have said then, and I would say now, that I owe my recovery to that guy. Yeah. He really helped me. He would listen to me just kind of go on and on and on. And one time I was talking to him, I was talking about my ex and my kids and my family, and I must have talked for a good 45 minutes with him just nodding his head and going, "Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, yeah, okay." When I was done, he said to me, "You know what I think, Nate?" And I said, "What's that, Corey?" He said, "I think that if you go back to her you're going to relapse. You're not going to stay sober. And him saying that, it just really hit home for me. And it went, yeah, that relationship's over. You know, like that for me was when inside me, that's when my marriage really ended, was when I went, if I'm in that marriage, I can't stay sober. So yeah, I like Corey did so much for me. That was just one of the many things he did. And I never tell my story without making sure people hear about him.
I got to give credit where it's due. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I left, you know, and I put a lot of work. I did a lot of 12-step program stuff. I did a lot of treatment stuff, or not treatment, sorry, therapeutic stuff. I did some inner child work to deal with the sexual abuse and the physical abuse. Yeah. Did a lot of that. I didn't go back to my trade right away. I went and I worked in a factory. Yep. And we made like trailers and campers and RVs. Okay. Fraser View, I think they were called. Great place to work. There were nice people. I worked with good people. You paid for a factory. It paid okay. You know, like it was a good place. I worked there about 2 years. The goal was to get back to my trade in construction, which I was able to do after a couple of years. Yeah. And I went to work for this place. I worked there about 6 weeks. And then one day I get my paycheck and I got 2 checks. Oh. And so I called the office and said, like, I got this other check here for like $600 and I don't know what it's for. And they said, well, we after you worked here for a bit, like we looked and went, wow, this guy should be making more than he is. So they actually gave me a raise and they made it retro. Wow. So from day one to, they said, no, we should have been paying you this amount. You're pretty good. So then the following week I get another, because I paid every week there. The following week I get another letter in my paycheck that says, we've waived your waiting period for benefits. You're good to go.
Oh, geez, eh?
So I was like, great, right? The next week I made a lift and threw my back out.
Oh,
and
no.
Through the course of recovery, my doctor said, listen, man, like you have arthritis in your lower back and both your hips. Yeah. And WCB won't cover this anymore. They're going to just say it's arthritis. That's not work related. Oh. Which is what happened. And he also said, and which WCB also confirmed, any future back problems would just be called arthritis.
Time to switch.
Hey guys, well, I got my denture in from dentkits.com. And I got to tell you, for the first time in 3 years, I'm looking in the mirror and I'm not reliving the trauma. I'm not feeling terrible about myself. I like my smile. It's so awesome. Anyway, hey, they are way less expensive than traditional dentures. No matter what your situation is, whether you're missing one tooth or a whole mouthful, dentkits.com has an affordable solution for you. Check them out, guys. I am so proud to be an ambassador for this product. Now that I have my smile fixed, you can look forward to some video episodes of Ashes to Awesome. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
Time to switch it up then.
Yep, that's what he said. Time for a new job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
sounds like to me.
Yeah. So at that time, through my church, I had been running a little weekly drop-in and doing outreach into the camps on the weekends. Mm-hmm. So they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be an outreach worker. So they retrained me. I got a diploma from the same school Ryan went to.
Okay. Yeah.
And got that diploma, got into doing my youth outreach. Mm-hmm. And then things just kind of took off from there. I wanted to stay with youth. But as I was working my way through, I got asked to come up and do some stuff with adults. And so I ended up staying in the adult world, working in adult services. My wife and I did, about 2 years ago, we ran a youth group home down in Vancouver. So that was a lot of fun. Like we had room for 5 youth and at one time we had 6. So it was just, it was lots of fun. We had a good time there, good organization there to work for. And so we did that. And then I became a director and now executive director.
So how long have you been in your current position then, Nate?
So I have been here about 7 months.
Okay. So still pretty fresh at her, right?
Yes.
I know, Ryan has a lot of kind things to say about you and he respects you immensely, which from Ryan means a lot. He's not. His
we work together
doesn't
somewhere
come,
else as
by
well.
default. That's for sure, right? So
right? I worked with Ryan at the Phoenix Center.
Okay.
So I worked with him for a couple of years there. And actually, when I came here, and they had an opening for the food center where Ryan is now. I actually called him and said, dude, this would be perfect for you. You know, he lives in Mission. It's, you know, and it's a job where you need a lot of empathy and a lot of skill. And I thought, well, Ryan,
those he has
perfect.
both, right?
Yeah,
to say the least.
So it was good, you know, like bringing him in and having a like. He's a really good worker. I really like him and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, he's so much. Of course, I don't know if do you know our history, Ryan and I? Did he mention to you at all? We were friends in grade school, right? Is how we.
Oh yeah, he did tell me.
Yeah, right. It was him, my twin brother, and myself were kind of like the three musketeers for years, right? And then, kind of lost track of him, and the universe provides, though, and he was always kind of reaching out here and there to us, and to myself anyway. And then I started the podcast out and just happened to, hey, how's it going, man? I'd finally answered his many, many attempts to get in touch. But as you know, when you're in addiction, I don't want to talk to anybody. I've got nothing to say, right? I got nothing constructive to say. Hey, I'm screwing my life up right now, and I'd rather, not everybody was a part of that. So it wasn't until I sobered up, that I did respond back to him. And he's turned out to be quite the character.
Yeah.
He's changed our lives, my life, and everybody involved with the show. I mean, profoundly. I can't even tell you in how many different ways, really. Nice. Right?
So I had a good career climb. Like I worked at Vancouver Coastal Health. That was where I got my first coordinator position, and then I left there to become a manager at a shelter for the Lookout Society.
Okay.
And I got my first director job at the Salvation Army. I was there for 4 years with them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was in Abbotsford, like right after I don't know if you recall this, but the chicken manure incident in Abbotsford.
I have no idea what you're referring to, but now I want to. Yeah.
Got to be 7 or 8 years ago now. There's a homeless camp on Gladys, and it actually existed right across the street from the Salvation Army because that's where the services are in Abbotsford. That's where you could eat, take a shower, do your laundry. So we had campers around us. Yeah. So they had one right on the edge of Gladys across the street, and the city decided to come in and spray chicken manure all over the campsite.
Really?
So to keep people out. And they
How long ago was that?
I'm going to say 7 or 8 years, because I was there for 4 years.
That seems even too recent for something like that. Like that seems almost surreal, right? Like that somebody would do that. I mean, these days you'd be the politician that said yes to that, or the city manager, whoever, would be instantly ostracized, right?
Oh,
these days, right?
It was really bad, and so when I came in, it was just on the heels of that.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of work that had to be done in Abbotsford for Abbotsford and the Salvation Army. So we ended up going like completely harm reduction. I think we were the first Salvation Army site to be like actually handing out harm reduction materials.
Okay.
We were pet friendly in the shelter. That's always been a thing for me, is we need pet friendly services.
Right.
So wherever I've gone, we're going pet friendly. Phoenix, we went pet friendly. Salvation Army. Didn't have to do it here at MCSS because they were already pet friendly.
Okay.
But there's at least 25% of the homeless population has pets. So
really, is that high? Eh?
Yeah, it's not high. Kidding. Yeah, and when you say no pets, you're cutting off a lot of people.
Yeah, you are. Right.
Yeah. And those pets are important. I know that people often see folks who don't have a place to live. They have a dog or a cat, and people, the poor animal. Most of the guys I know, it's not cool that the animal's sleeping on the street, but that's where their human is.
Yeah.
And that relationship is important to the animal as well as to the person. For the person, it's for some people that's what keeps them sane while they're out there. Yeah. For others, it's what gives them that sense of protection.
Yeah.
But it's their partner, it's their mate. Like you don't say, hey, if you split up, we can give you a place to sleep tonight. Like,
that's. Yeah. And I love that. I love that actually. That's the focus of yours, because I don't think it is enough anyway, right?
Yeah. And like I knew plenty of people who had pets when they didn't have a place to live, and the pets ate before they did.
Every single person I've ever met that has a pet, and you know what? Anybody that I would call somebody I respect, most certainly, they're whether they're underhoused or not. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Their pet eats first, right? So
and and they were very good about their flea medication because they wanted their dogs to cuddle up to them at night and stay warm, and right. So the flea medication was important. So it wasn't just like
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they don't get flea medication because we can't afford it. No. That's one of the things that we'll find money for.
Yeah.
Because we don't want fleas going through our sleeping bags and all that stuff, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. So, I just, so the average person, and I know for myself here at the show, we've talked quite a bit about getting out there and you know, doing some sort of outreach and you know, here in Calgary. But for the average person, and you know, for me being in the position I am, I kind of have access to some resources or at least some corporate sponsorship for something like that. You know, if I ever find the time. If the average person wants to do something, what can they do? You know, you've got some experience under your belt now, and you know, if Joe Blow wants to, is it a cash donation is kind of the way to go, or is there something that someone with more time than money can get out and do, and you know, as far as outreach goes?
Both. So if you there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer in most shelters and most organizations that deal with marginalized people. There's usually plenty of opportunity to volunteer.
Okay.
And there's always opportunity to give money.
Yeah,
there's a lot of programs go unfunded, and it's up to the organizations to try and arrange that funding. So, like we've got a fundraiser coming up.
Yeah.
So we've got we've been gifted actually a medical mobile unit from the City of Mission. Wow. And so it is an RV like you would use for camping. Yeah. And they went in and they tore the bedroom out, and they put in a doctor's office. Okay. They took the little shower out. They put in a bigger shower. They changed some of the cabinetry, and basically what we have is like a driving doctor's office.
That is so cool.
Or a mobile doctor's office, right? Yeah. And we have a place where people can come in and take a shower if that's what they need. We can pull into like homeless campsites. So we can pull in. We're working with the Division of Family Practice on having doctors on board, nurse practitioners on board. When we don't have doctors and nurses on board, then our outreach workers will be on there. We're hoping that we can hire an LPN. If we can raise enough money, we would like to hire an LPN. Yeah. So that we can continue to do wound care and things like that when we don't have a doctor or nurse support. No kidding. Some of those medical services that people need on that day-to-day when you're homeless, we could still provide some of that. And for anybody listening who might be around, there's opportunities to participate in that too. So
I'll tell you what, Nate, a huge part of our listener base is in the Lower Mainland.
Oh, cool.
Right? So, I would say most of our Canadian listeners are, as a matter of fact, right? You know,
okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So we're doing a fundraiser for the mobile RV. The mobile medical unit is what we're doing. I keep going medical RV, but everybody else in town goes mobile medical unit.
Oh no, it's a freaking camper, right?
So we're doing a thing called 24 Hours Homeless. Okay. And we're still looking for 5 more people to participate. Well, we've got 5, and if we have 5, we'll move forward, and hopefully we'll fill the other 5 by August 17th.
Surely we got to have 5 of you guys out in the Lower Mainland to jump in on this. Whatever this is, we're about to find out, but sure we do, right? Okay.
So what it is people come in on August the 17th at 4 o'clock, which is a Thursday. Okay. And they come to the shelter. They spend a night in the shelter. Now we've got a space that is secluded that we normally use in the winter, so it's for the extreme weather response. Yeah. So these 10 people will go into the extreme weather response and experience that as their night in the shelter, is what would happen in extreme weather. We will have an extra staff member on duty, and it is kind of a secluded place where they're not out. We're not taking beds away from anybody. We're not in the dorm. We're off to the side. So we'll have extra staff there as well. So they spend the night, get up in the morning, and they're given a case plan very similar to what we would give somebody who was homeless and coming into the shelter, and the things that they need to do to get housing, and in some cases to stay in the shelter. Like there has to be some forward movement. So they come in, they get their case plan in the morning. They're then given the day to go out and try and complete this case plan. So we were just today figuring out what are the things that we want on the plan. And so we've got things like trying to make a doctor's appointment, registering with BC Housing, a few different things that we ask people to do. Mm-hmm. But when you come in with no cash.
No ID.
No ID, no cash cards, and no car, and no phone. So you come in the way most of our people come in.
Damn straight.
When they're looking for service, right? And then you try and do this case plan, and then we have a debrief dinner at 4:00, and I've 4:30 on Friday. Now I've done this before, and this fundraiser, and people who experience it, it changes them.
Oh, like one of
the things that's funny is, when I'm trying to round people up to take part in this, is they'll say, well, the shelter's kind of dangerous, or you never know what you can. You never know what's going to happen there for health. Like, people might be sick, and I don't want to get sick.
No, we got you secluded. Next. Okay.
You're
and checking off the boxes now, right?
And I don't know the smells, and I'm not sure. But all of that is stigma.
Yeah, it is.
Right, and that's what this program starts to break down.
Yeah,
the stigma. The people who come in,
I absolutely love it. Yeah.
One of the folks who came in and stayed with us one time doing this said, "I met so many nice people,
right.
Not at all what I was expecting."
Nope.
Right, so and then they find out that some of these folks are really talented musically, and some are talented artists, and some have had families and big jobs like lawyers, and they start to find out, oh wow, like this is much different than I thought, and then they find out just how difficult it can be to break that cycle of addiction. So when we send them out to do some of the tasks in their case plan, they don't have ID.
Yeah.
So we send them out and say, well, go find a job. Well, without ID, how are you going to get hired? You have a resume, but you have no way to get your resume right now. So I don't know what you're going to do, but you still got to go look for work. You've got to find an income. Talk to income assistants. Ask them how you get income assistance when you don't have ID.
Yeah.
Right? And so people start to recognize, like, it's not as simple as get a job.
It's really not. I have some resources, I have some family that was helping me out, and the frustration almost broke me when I came in from active addiction. When I came in from the cold, I like to say, right?
Yeah.
It almost broke me, the frustration. Yeah. And that was with, some support.
Yeah.
Right. So I can't imagine what those people go through. And I can't imagine. I've seen it, and in a tertiary way, and I was right there for a while too. And you're right. That's an amazing way to get people's attention. It really is. Like, that is an amazing way to do it.
Yeah. And it really opens people's eyes to what's going on. And it was funny. This fellow who is going to be doing it coming up and was talking to me about just that. He said, like, I'm worried about the sickness. I'm worried about, the threat, this and that. He said, Nate, he said, I was sitting there and I was kind of getting worried about it. He said, then it occurred to me, if I'm worried about those things, so is everybody else who comes into that shelter. And maybe there's something we need to do about the system.
Well said.
Right?
Well
and
said.
I was like, absolutely. Like, and that's what this fundraiser is, to keep the mobile medical unit going, because we don't get operational money. We've just been given the RV. So to keep it on the road, we've got to raise money.
Yeah.
So that's what the fundraiser is for, is to keep that medical mobile unit on the road. But it's also for people to have a real in-depth look at homelessness and just see how tough that struggle is when you're trying to get out of it.
It's amazing. Do you have a website or a Facebook page or any social media, like something about this fundraiser that I can put the show notes for the listeners?
We do. Yeah. We have.
Okay. Yeah, you can read it out now, and then if you send it over to me, I can put it in the thing, right? But
I'll send it to you for sure. We have an Instagram page that our community resources person overseas.
Okay. And what's that called?
So it's just Mission Community Services.
Yeah.
And then we have a Facebook page. Again, Mission Community Services.
Yeah, if you send me a link to all the socials, and I'll make sure that they get up, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll put them in the show notes for people to pay attention to. And guys, if you can spare a few bucks, whatever it is, anything you can do is awesome and much appreciated. And I don't think my involvement with this is done either. I think as I'm sitting here talking, my wheels are turning here, Nate. So we'll talk after the show, after we're done recording. But,
and if people want to donate, starting on Monday, we'll be promoting on our website. So if you Google Mission Community Services, it'll take you there. But we will have a page up. You'll be able to see who is coming in. They'll have a little bio and their name. You can just click on one of the names and donate in through them.
Excellent. And actually, this interview should. What day is it today? Jeez, it's Monday.
Yeah.
This will be up Tuesday. Tomorrow, I'll have this aired. So yeah,
cool.
I'll set up tonight and get this one done. So
yeah, and if people want to give, that's great. And again, like we are looking for 5 more people to come and
there's
share.
There's got to be 5 more out there, guys. I'm just going to talk to some of my people in Vancouver, and I'm going to see what I can't do.
Cool.
That's all my sponsors, literally all but one, and he's from Vancouver, and he's in Thailand now. So, yeah. All the money's coming out of Vancouver for me, so at least I can do is try and get something back over there. Right? So, yeah. I'm sure we can find you a few people to participate in that, and hopefully to donate as well. And again, guys, if there's ever a worthy cause, if you listen to the show and you get anything from it, keep in mind. Less than 2 years ago, I was there myself. So right. Well, Nate, that brings me to my favorite part of the show, and that is the Daily Gratitudes. And
today's Daily Gratitudes are brought to you by Yacha Treatment Centers in Phuket, Thailand. They are a clinic run by clinicians, not a business run by businessmen. And they know that where addiction is the smoke, trauma is the fire. Learn more at yachacenters.com. That's YATRACENTRE.com. And now here's your Daily Gratitudes.
And of course, whenever I do have a guest on the show, I like to get some daily gratitudes from them. So what you got for me today?
So today I'm as always, every day grateful for my loving wife. Her name is Irene. She's a social worker with Vancouver Coastal Health, and she has just been the best thing to happen to me in a very long time.
Wow. Hello, Irene. Yes.
Yeah. I'm always grateful for my dogs. We have 2 dogs, Unser and Meat.
Unser and Meat.
Yeah, I really like.
I love that.
Yeah, Meat's 15 pounds. She's not the bulldog you're picturing.
I was picturing a Roddy Mastiff, Clydesdale combo or something with a name like that, right? Yeah.
We called her that because we rescued her from a Korean dog food farm.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right?
Yeah,
so
Meat makes sense.
Meat.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And grateful for my recovery. And I'm really grateful for the people I work with at MCSS. Like, it is such a great crew.
No kidding, eh?
Every day I like coming to work every day. And I got to tell you, I haven't always felt that.
No.
But here, it's just been such a great place to work. The staff are so good. I love the clientele. I love the work we do. I love the dedication of people. I have a lot of daily gratitude. It's kind of the same thing every day, but
that's awesome. That's okay too.
I'm so
right?
grateful.
Yeah. I really like that, Nate. To speak to that real quick, culture usually starts from the top down, right? So you probably got something to do with that amazing work environment you're in. I'm just saying, right? So, and for myself, I'm grateful for you for taking the time to come on the show with us here. Ryan's been talking about it for quite some time, so I really am grateful for that. And my final gratitude goes out to the listeners. It's always to you guys, the listeners. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. You are, you blow my mind every day, right? When I look at the numbers and how fast the show is growing and how fast the message is getting out. And every time you make a comment on the Spotify, which now you can watch both video and audio, and listen to the audio on Spotify. Every time you rate or review on Apple or any of the platforms that you're on, talk to your friends, do whatever you're doing because, it's working. And every time you do any one of these things, you are getting me a little bit closer to living my best life. And my best life is to make a humble living spreading the message. The message is this. If you are in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start that lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, go to a meeting, call them to detox, do whatever the hell it is you need to do to get that journey started because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you are the loved one of somebody who is suffering an addiction right now, you've just taken the time to listen to our conversation. Just take 1 more minute out of your day, text that person, let them know they are loved. Use the words,
"You are loved."
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings it back.
I'm the monster with a mono to drugs and frustration. Created this isolation that others find selfish. Had to cope with some shit that could kill, hit the all switch. Had to do a mind shit to get through the time stretch. Seems like bad days last and the good days fly quick. This monster in my thoughts taunts me till I'm sick. Takes over reality. Can you feel the insanity? Body shaking like my thoughts are causing allergies. Truth and fiction can't seem to tell the difference. Anyone out there relate to me? My only one tripping. Left wishing I could be the normal one in the room. Anxiety got me me twitching, feel a monster in the distance. Gotta get busy, can't let this shit affect me. When no one left to protect, who's gonna protect me? Feels like shit's getting messy. Now that the monster's taking over, I think it's the only one that gets me. Yeah.
Stuck in your head, monsters under your bed. We are monsters. Oh, we are monsters. Oh.
Met the monster in my storm. Did I let him stay too long? Cause he don't wanna leave till everybody's gone. Pushed away the ones that I need. It's messed up cause inside it's not who I wanna be. Think one thing and do another. React to the emotion that wants me to suffer. Sorry if I smother. I suffocate my relationship like we undercover. Wanna disconnect and run from the suburbs. The old me wants to return, wants me to forget what I learned. Have nowhere to turn with all the bridges burned. Pain is what I know, heart's hard as stone. Feel the shakes in my bones, I'm turning cold. Look at what I did, you had my back from the beginning, but I couldn't see it. I was blinded by my feelings, selfish. I guess me and the monster have a lot in common. Look in the mirror, see the reflection of the problem. Yeah.
Stuck in your head, monsters under your bed. We are monsters. Oh, we are monsters. Oh.
Am I the monster? I'm the monster with a mono to drugs and frustration. Created this isolation that others find selfish. Had to cope with some shit that could kill, hit the off switch. Had to do a mind shit to get through the time stretch. Seems like bad days last and the good days fly quick. This monster in my thoughts taunts me till I'm sick. Takes over reality, can you feel the insanity? Body shaking like my thoughts are causing allergies. Truth from fiction, can't seem to tell the difference. Anyone decide to rob him? Am I the one trying to drag us to the bottom? When I get suspicious, is it all in my noggin? I guess this monster is morphed into my core. Spent so much time alone, thought I was talking to the walls. Locked in a prison, being haunted by my thoughts. Gotta break out and take out the monster like a boss, yeah.